Bryophytes are a fascinating and, despite their simple internal and external structure, very diverse group of plants. Due to their usually small size and the environmental niches they occupy, we often do not see them or overlook them. However, they are a very important group and an indispensable component of our forests, whose flora is constantly changing with the increasing impact of humans on the natural environment. Life of the forest. Bryophytes. Usually when we walk through the forest, we notice the big things. We see the trees and notice the flowers and ferns growing in the undergrowth. However, we rarely pay attention to the tiny things. And this is exactly the world of mosses and liverworts. These small plants are hidden under our feet, growing on tree trunks, branches, dead wood and rocks. But to really get to know this world, you have to bend down, pick up a magnifying glass and take a closer look at what is growing there. For example, if we take a close look at this fragment of a root, we will see at least a dozen different species of mosses and liverworts. The general term bryophytes covers a whole range of different species currently belonging to three systematic groups: mosses, liverworts and hornworts, which are characterized by certain common features. These are mainly the dominance of the haploid generation over the diploid, that is, the gametophyte over the sporophyte. Therefore, it is currently a traditional term, not a scientific one. Bryophytes are plants that are characterized by their great adaptability to life in different, often extreme environmental conditions. They can be found on all continents and in every climate zone, from dry deserts to areas of the Arctic and Antarctic that are not covered by ice sheets. The only places they cannot be found are in the seas and oceans. In Poland, we have species that occur in a wide ecological spectrum when it comes to ecosystems, from dry grasslands to fertile riparian forests, ending with alder forests or even further, wetter in peat bogs. It is estimated that there are over 20,000 species of bryophytes in the world. In Poland, there are over 900 of them, including about 700 species of mosses, 250 liverworts, and 4 species of hornworts. Here we see a specific group of mosses and liverworts, the so-called epiphytic species, which grow on the bark of trees and shrubs. As for this maple, maples are such a good phorophyte, that is, a place where these epiphytic species occur, because of the texture of the bark, the pH and other factors. These species, which tightly cover the trunk of this maple, are species of the genus Anomodon, that is, the rambling tail moss of the flat Neckera. These are the so-called old-growth species, that is, species that occur in stands that have a long age continuity, one could say existence. That is, there has always been a forest here for many, many decades, or even hundreds of years. Mosses are the largest group of bryophytes found in Poland. Over 200 of the 700 described species are closely related to forests. They are generally small in size, from a few millimeters to a few centimeters. The exception is the common haircap, which can grow to a height of over 50 centimeters. Mosses are the most common plants we can come across when walking in the forest, in a meadow or in a park, where we see them in smaller or larger groups. They form turf, carpets or cushions made up of individual leafy, sometimes branched stems. Erect or creeping, they are attached to the ground by rhizoids. Mosses do not have typical roots, they only have rhizoids. These are multicellular root-like protuberances that are used to attach to various types of substrate. They are either epixylic species, that is, to deadwood, or epigeic, terrestrial to the soil, or epiphytic on a tree, or epilithic on rocks. Often, a leafless seta, also known as a stalk, of varying colors and sizes is found at the top of the stems. It ends in a characteristic enclosure in which spores are formed. Spores are very small and could be carried by the wind, spreading incredibly far. This is why many species have such a wide range. Some are, you could say, truly cosmopolitan. The leafy stem is a gametophyte, the sex generation that is dominant in mosses, with a single number of chromosomes, haploid. On the other hand, moss gametophytes can also reproduce in a different way, vegetatively, for example by growing, that is, such a gametophyte grows, then fragments, and can colonize large areas, for example here in the forest. But there are other ways. Here we have a species like the beaked bow moss, which can reproduce by breaking off leaves, which can give rise to a new plant in a new location. A seta with a spore capsule is a sporophyte, that is, the asexual generation of mosses with a diploid number of chromosomes. Mosses do not actively absorb any nutrients or water. In this respect, they can be considered poilohydric organisms, meaning that they absorb everything that passively lands on the surface of the turf or between the leaves. In forests, we have two groups of mosses that are typical of forests. One is the epixylic species that grow on deadwood. The second group are epiphytic species which grow on other plants, specifically on trees. But let's focus on the epixylic species here. It is one of the strongest indicators of the naturalness of a forest ecosystem, associated with natural forests, with well-preserved forests, rich in deadwood. And here, on this beech log, we can find many different species of moss and liverwort, which are associated with deadwood. The most interesting species that occurs here is the shining heucheria, a very spectacular species with large leaves. If we take a closer look, we can even see with the naked eye that the cells that make up its leaves are very large. This makes it look very impressive, as if it were transparent. This small plant grows to a size of 1 to 5 centimeters. In Poland, it is a very rare and endangered species. It is a mountain moss, with a lower subalpine distribution type, most often at an altitude of 800 to 1,100 meters above sea level. It grows mainly in places with high air humidity and strong shade, such as deep valleys, stream banks, and wet rocks. It prefers beech and fir or spruce forests. The shining heucheria is under strict protection. The big shaggy moss is one of the larger moss species in Europe. It can grow up to 20 centimeters in size. It forms dense clusters, turfs that are extremely impressive and easy to spot. The big shaggy moss is a typical terrestrial and forest species. It has a fairly wide range of occurrence, from coniferous forests to alder swamp forests. However, it is more common in humid habitats. This species is partially protected. The common haircap. It is the largest Polish bryophyte and one of the most impressive in the world. We are standing in an area where the forest floor is densely covered with the common haircap. What we are obviously seeing here is a gametophyte, that is the haploid sex generation. Under favorable conditions, these green turfs can grow up to half a meter high. They are composed of individual small stems, leafy stems that have tiny leaves. These plants form dense or loose turf. These often produce sporophytes with a long seta, ending in a large capsule completely covered with a cap. The common haircap is a species that prefers acidic soil. It is associated with damp and marshy habitats. What is the age of such moss? It varies because there are species that live, for example, a few or several months, such as the so-called ephemeral species, for example, bonfire moss. But there are also those that live even for several decades, like this common haircap or the peat moss. Ostrich plume feather moss. This exceptionally photogenic and beautiful moss is quite common throughout Poland. It occurs in clusters, extensive and loose turf of light green or green color. They form long, up to 10 centimeters, regularly branched and arranged in one plane stems. Their appearance resembles miniature fern leaves or feathers. It is a fairly common species found in forests with acidic soil and in pine and spruce forests. Dead wood is a habitat for many species of moss and liverwort. We are dealing with a group of epixylic species, that is, species that grow on wood. And at this point we are standing next to a fallen, dead fir tree that has been dead for many years. And among the various species that grow on it, we can also find the green shield moss. It is an extraordinary bryophyte, and if it were not for the sporophyte, we would probably not even know of its existence. It has a greatly reduced gametophyte. It consists of microscopic leaves, often hidden in the substrate in which it grows. The barely visible sporophyte ends in a slightly curved capsule. In its small cylindrical interior, tiny spores are produced. It is estimated that more than 5 million of them can be produced. It is a plant strongly associated with vast and old forests. This species is very rare in Poland. In fact, it is only in the Bieszczady Mountains that we can find it more often. This is because these forests are rich in deadwood, especially fir, as this is the species that grows most frequently. But we also find it on other species, such as willow and even aspen. But there are far fewer of these trees in the Bieszczady Mountains, so it mainly grows on firs. In other parts of the country, it is extremely rare. It is an endangered species, strictly protected in Poland. We can see a very interesting species of moss here, namely the brown shield moss. It is one of two species of the family Buxbaumicae in Poland. It is epigeel, meaning it grows on the surface of the ground. It is usually found in pine forests, but sometimes, as in this case, in young oak stands. The whole plant is about 1.5 centimeters, rarely up to 2 centimeters, so it is very small. The plant is interesting because it has a visible sporophyte on the seta, which is rarely up to 1.5 centimeters long. There is such a flattened capsule in which the spores are produced. At this point, some of those spore capsules have already opened. The spores have spilled out. It is the end of April. This spring was quite warm, so it matured quickly. Last year, in late autumn, we were here taking photos and shots of this species. The first snow had already fallen. These individuals had just developed these sporophytes in late autumn. In fact, these sporophytes had already started to develop from the gametophyte in September. Of course, they survived the winter and matured, as evidenced by their color. They are already dark brown and yellow-brown. So this species in this case produced these sporophytes last year in autumn, so that the spores can now be spread. The spores are spread and transported by the wind. And when it comes to fertilization, it cannot happen without water in all bryophytes. Large white moss. This moss forms dense, compact cushion-like turfs, the bulk of which are female individuals. The male ones are inconspicuous, dwarfed and hidden among the female ones. It is a dioecious species. In Poland, it very rarely produces sporophytes. We can wander through kilometers of forest and not see the spore-producing large white moss. However, in the Bieszczady Mountains, there are places, specifically south of Baligród, above the Rabski stream valley, where the large white moss sporulates in fields every year. And right here, in front of me, we can observe a very abundant field of large white moss. That is one that produces sporophytes. The large white moss mainly lives in coniferous forests, but can also be found in acid beech forests, alder swamp forests, and on the edges of moors and heaths. The second largest group of bryophytes are liverworts. In Poland, there are about 250 species of them. They are usually less impressive than mosses and less common. Some liverworts are large and impressive if these terms can be used in relation to these rather small plants. One such species is the common snakeskin liverwort, which has a thalloid shape. The very small liverwort, also thalloid, is a member of the germanderwort genus. It is very cool because we can observe both species side by side. Most species in this group live in forests or are associated with them. Among liverworts, a distinction is made between species that produce leafy stems, so-called leafy liverworts, and those that have a thallus as a gametophyte, so-called thallose liverworts. A characteristic feature of liverworts is, among other things, the structure and durability of the sporophyte, which is generally inconspicuous and short-lived. Here we are at a petrified carbonate spring. A beautiful liverwort grows on this dead beech branch, specifically the greasewort. And it is accompanied by the curled hook moss. If we look down here, we can see how it fights against this calcareous necrosis, or more precisely against the calcium carbonate that precipitates from the water that seeps to the surface in this area. Here you can see it very clearly. It is not only the moss that is flooded with this calcium carbonate, but also dead leaves, dead twigs and dead nettles. This species grows in this place. It likes this kind of carbonate substrate, and sometimes you can see that there is already so much calcium carbonate that it is difficult for it to grow. The common liverwort is one of the largest liverworts in Poland. It belongs to the thallose liverworts. Their dark green thalli are flat and adhere firmly to the substrate. Interesting umbrella-shaped formations can be seen on them. These are the female organs used for sexual reproduction, and the smaller disc-shaped ones are the male organs. The common liverwort is a dioecious species, which means that one individual produces male organs and the other female organs. Another characteristic feature are the cup-shaped structures on the surface of the thallus, which contain tiny gammas used for asexual reproduction. This liverwort is a common species most often found in secondary habitats created by humans, for example roadsides, orchards, cemeteries, parks, or ornamental plant nurseries. The handsome woolly wart. This beautiful leaf liverwort is one of the most impressive in Poland. The whole plant can be up to 12 centimeters in size. Handsome woolly wart is a species of damp places characteristic of spring areas. It grows on roots, deadwood, or very moist humus. Due to its preference for these specific ecological niches, it is a rather rare liverwort in Poland. It is mainly found in northern Poland and in the mountains. The third group of bryophytes are the hornworts, of which only 4 species are found in Poland. These are plants that produce a gametophyte in the form of a small green or dark green thallus, which rarely exceeds 1.5 to 2 centimeters in diameter. Their characteristic feature is the structure of the sporophyte, in which there is no seta. This entire part is practically a spore capsule. Due to their short life cycle, they are difficult to find in the natural environment. Bryophytes are considered to be one of the oldest land plants. They appeared hundreds of millions of years ago. Today, most researchers agree that bryophytes were the first group of plants to appear on land. They have changed only slightly over millions of years, which is why they can be described as living fossils. Despite having adapted to life on land, Bryophytes still require the presence of water for reproduction, a remnant of their ancestors, the algae. Unlike most land plants, they have no roots or typical conducting tissue. Which is why they never reach the impressive heights of other vascular plants. They contain the green pigment chlorophyll in their tissue and are therefore photosynthetic plants. They passively absorb water with nutrients from the environment. Because of the moss cells, liverworts and hornworts do not have vacuoles like embryophytes. They can survive even in unfavorable conditions where there is a lack of water. They can be rolled up for a few months and can actually dry out. Everyone thinks that this turf has died, but in fact, when it rains or there is some other precipitation, it revives. Bryophytes inhabit the terrestrial environment and fresh water. They are most commonly found in shady and damp places such as springs, stream banks, rock faces, peat bogs, or on deadwood in various types of forests. They also settle extremely poor substrates in pine forests, on sand grasslands, but also in man-altered conditions, including urban ones, on walls, railway tracks, building roofs. A whole range of species are associated with concrete structures. Concrete is a very good substrate for mosses. Anyone who has paving stones knows that mosses and sometimes liverworts quickly take over in the gaps or even on the paving stones where people walk less frequently. Here we have an old concrete structure. If we take a closer look, we can see several species of different mosses on both the horizontal part and the vertical walls, and here the hoary fringe moss, which is now very nicely illuminated, is soaked in water, and its leaves, tipped with hyaline hairs, shine beautifully in the sun. Due to their life strategy, bryophytes grow in high density to better store water and defend themselves more effectively against the onslaught of other plant species. The role of such mosses and bryophytes in forest ecosystems cannot be overestimated. Firstly, they store huge amounts of water, positively affecting the water balance, especially in dry, poorly moistened habitats, such as various types of coniferous forests. They promote the filtration of rainwater. By passing through such dense turf, it is purified, sometimes of substances that are anthropogenic in origin. As pioneer organisms, bryophytes also play a very important role in colonizing initial environments. By growing in such habitats, they simultaneously prepare the ground for other, more demanding plants. In this way, after colonization and further development, bryophytes fertilize the substrate with their dead remains, making it more friendly to other organisms. Peatland ecosystems play a special role in retaining water and carbon dioxide. The amount of carbon stored in the world's peatlands is estimated at around 400 to 620 gigatons. These ecosystems occupy an area of 2.5 to 3% of the Earth's surface. This means that they can store up to 30% of the carbon resources accumulated in all terrestrial ecosystems and twice as much as forests. Peatland ecosystems are an extremely valuable link in the global carbon balance. Peatlands are very sensitive to any environmental disturbances, especially those caused by human activity. In addition to accumulating greenhouse gases and water, they also have a very important function of delaying water runoff in the larger landscape system, the hydrological system in which they are located. Many of Poland's bryophytes are under strict or partial species protection. A large proportion of them are threatened with extinction and their populations are rapidly declining. The biggest threat to native bryophytes is the disappearance of the habitats they prefer. Species living in places where water plays a key role are disappearing due to drainage, the encroachment of various types of succession, and the disappearance of swamp forests and spruce forests on peat bogs. The current climate change is certainly also having an impact on this process. Meadow and grassland species are disappearing due to a lack of extensive use. In turn, species of poor forests are disappearing due to the increased rate of herbaceous and woody plant succession associated with an increase in soil fertility. Bryophytes, that is, the three systematic groups, are extremely diverse in terms of form and shape. They can be found in every ecosystem on Earth, including Poland. They are an indispensable component of Polish forests and other ecosystems. Despite their small size and the fact that we often pay attention to larger plants, colourful perennials, bushes with tasty fruits and impressive trees, let us not forget about bryophytes when hiking in the woods. It is worth going down to the stream valley, bending over a stone, a rock, the trunk of a dead tree, and to look at and to try and understand this rich and diverse world of forms and shapes of the bryophytes. Who knows, maybe we will catch the bug and want to learn the secrets of the bryophytes in our forests. Let us remember that bryophytes are an indispensable component of every forest ecosystem, as important as the undergrowth, bushes, or even trees.